underwater nodes?
No, they're not underwater nodes. There are coastal nodes, and those the coastal nodes activate the spawn tables and change them for different points of interest that are out in the underwater areas and islands.
Expansion.
I do have one question. Did you ever play Destiny, the first one?
Yeah, I played a little bit of Destiny.
How did you feel about it?
I thought it was a good game.
It wasn't his destiny to continue.
Oh,
Lord.
We got a comedian over here.
my dad's in chat.
Huh?
So the different tiers of nodes, can you like explain like what each tier will unlock? I guess in like example.
Well, that's
because we've been getting mostly just information as far as like level 10s will be 1, level 20s will be 2, and that's not really too much to go on.
Yeah, we haven't really gotten like a good quality like answer.
So the question is, what do each of the stages unlock?
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh my god,
that's a bit of a big answer.
The reason why
just like some examples. You don't got to name everything. Just like
okay. I was like, how late are we gonna stay up?
Jeez.
Like, is there gonna be stronger enemies as far as like, is there gonna be respawned enemies and the other ones despawn to where they're gonna be stronger? Are they gonna be different? Are they gonna have different actually attack patterns?
Yeah. So essentially, what happens is, at least on a spawn front, the areas around nodes, they have what are called stat tables, and the dynamic spawn tables are tied. Tables are usually housed around points of interest, or dungeons and different types of encounters. So when the node advances, depending on the type of the node that inherits the area with the point of interest or different dynamic spawn tables, that can influence the breed of NPC, essentially the faction, the race of the NPC. It can also influence the types of AIs that the NPCs will employ. And it will increase the level, and it will increase the level of the NPCs as well. No, this is structurally built with some.
So there's like a brain behind it.
Well, we call them parameters. So essentially, we want there to be a variance, so it's not the same thing each time if that node levels up differently, and within those parameters are acceptable NPC classes that can be selected for the different progressions.
Okay. So it has to make like checks in order to be spawned, basically.
Sort of, yeah. But like if you think of like systems and buildings that come online, I mean, at the third stage is when all the government becomes active. It's when they're siegeable. This is when mayors can get elected. And then at the fourth stage, additional apartment buildings come online. Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. At the fourth stage, the mayor has the option to build additional apartment buildings, and that's when you're going to see, nodes start to expand significantly. The other thing is housing at the third stage is only going to be small size housing that's available. Fourth stage becomes the medium size become introduced. The fifth stage, the large, becomes introduced, and at the sixth stage, the mansions start to come online. And your housing can advance in each of those stages. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that each stage is a significant by a factor of additional systems that start to activate.
I have one question with that. If a person comes from a level 1 node and wanders over to our node, and that's like level 3 or 4, would the enemies just destroy him?
No. So think of nodes as like NPC cities that you would normally experience in an MMO, right? nodes are not like hostile to just independent players. The only time a node is hostile to a player is if that player is a declared citizen of a node and in which the node you're entering has declared a war against. And then there's a set period of time where those citizens are flagged for PvP against each other with no corruption consequence.
I think he's more saying like the level
I'm talking
cap
about
for
the-
that area.
Yes, I'm talking about the
Oh,
actual AI that you fight.
Like NPC monsters?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
the
like the
mobs you
monsters,
find
this
in the
is tier
forest.
3.
Like, will it be too high?
The
for
mobs. Would it be
level
too
one?
high because he came from a level 1 zone where he wasn't getting a lot of XP,
Oh,
and now
I
the
see.
enemies
I
are
see.
strong?
Okay, yeah. So remember I was telling you there's static spawn tables and then there's dynamic spawn tables?
Yes.
So the regionality of the game still adheres to a traditional inward circle difficulty that you might experience in other games, right? And that reflects on the static spawn tables. So regions are always going to have static spawn tables that allow that normal progression in difficulty. And then the dynamic spawn tables, those get more difficult as the node levels. So if you're a level 1 person in a level 1 area and a node gets to the size of a metropolis, you're still going to have static spawn tables that reflect the content appropriate for that level 1 person. But POIs are going to come online around that region because the node has advanced to a higher stage. And when those POI dynamic spawn tables come online, they're going to spawn higher level creatures.
Oh, so you can be randomly walking around and you see an enemy that's not really supposed to be there, and he just strikes you. That's part of the dynamic.
Right, exactly. And that's if you choose to go in those certain areas. You can stay with the static ones, and that's relevant to your experience. Now, this is all beneficial because, as I talked about earlier, MMOs suffer from that starting zone emptiness later on. And if there is content that's relevant for the endgame players, for a new player that comes in 6 months later, at least they're going to be introduced into that social dynamic, which is such an important part of keeping players interested in the game.
Follow-up question on nodes. How long do you think it would take a node to go from nothing to the fully upgraded metropolis?
I would think that would take months. And that's kind of the way that we're structuring the experience thresholds. Now, obviously, the nodes employ a algorithmic, heuristic approach to kind of taking set segments of time and adapting the necessary thresholds to reflect the server population and density. But the idea is to incorporate in each of those interstitial stage advancements a significant period of time so that the effort is reflected as an investment from the player side.
I got a quick question about
nodes. So we know that there's been some information on, say, like scholar nodes having the ability to build like fast travel when they're a metropolis to areas within their zone of influence.
Right.
Has there been ideas that are being kicked around about the unique benefits for, say, a military node or an economic node that could kind of rival the utility or the power of that scholar node feature?
Absolutely. So we call these essentially the node superpowers. And the superpowers differ from node type. So the superpower that is the teleportation ability for connecting all the vassal nodes with the scientific metropolis. That's a pretty significant change in the way that the game exists essentially for players, and it will reflect in that region since metropolises encompass about 1/5 of the world's total surface area. Let's say, for example, on the economic front, one of the major. Oops, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the major benefits of essentially creating this economic metropolis is the ability to connect all of the vassal state nodes into essentially a connected auction house system. So without that economic metropolis, there is no connected auction house with all of those lesser nodes. And I think didn't I put out an economic node
Yes, I'm linking an AOC discussion right now. The scientific and economic node blogs, which will give you
nice. So
full breakdown.
yeah, so we haven't gone into we haven't released the blogs yet on the military and the divine node benefits for the superpower stuff. But they're pretty significant.
All right, I have two questions. Number one, for a divine node, any possibility of calling divine power upon another node for battle?
So not exactly like that.
But it's not a no, so there's still hope.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could role play some divine power if you declared war on another node.
There you go.
You can't like use the Ark of the Covenant to like strike us down.
Right. So I mean, I guess if I were to think of ways that you could think of that, maybe the reliquary system does provide certain benefits that can be used during node sieges, and they are proximity based, and some of them could have lore behind it that is more divine in nature, but there's no specific like divine,
right? Yeah, obviously.
Whatever. Yeah.
So my other question regarding nodes would be, so let's say I were to get a group of 8 players, the general group size you've stated. How long, or is it possible per se for a group of 8 people to, let's say they start out in the starting zone together, they like try and just, get as far away as possible and set up their own encampment, and let's say try and get it to maybe not a metropolis, but like 1 or 2 stages before. How difficult would that be for only like 8 players, or would they have to expand to like 16, 32?
That'd be relatively impossible. So the 8 players could maybe, if they were to stay in a certain area over a period of maybe a few days, get to stage 1. But when you think about the general zone of influence that exists, which is roughly a 1.5 by 1.5 kilometer surface area, there needs to be a significant population from a heat mapping standpoint in order to actually advance the node. So it's going to require some significant number of people. I don't think 8 is sufficient in that regard.
So would you say like on day 1, would you say that like we'll have level 1 nodes on day 1, or is that something that's
absolutely. No, that's absolutely. You will have, there will be stage 2 nodes on day 1 probably. Okay. And the reason for that is because day 1 you're going to have thousands of players running around certain areas, not just 8, and those thousands of players are going to contribute significant experience to the node's advancement.
Because there's only 4 spawn points, right?
So there's 4 spawn points, and those those spawn points segment off into different starting areas. So because each primary race has 2 sub races, essentially, when you're returning to the world of So originally in the lore of Ashes, there were 4 primary races that existed. They were the Aelan humans, the Pyrian elves, the Dunzenkel dwarves, and the Renkai, not the Renkai, I'm sorry, the orcs. I can't remember, what was the parent race?
On the left side of the tree, right?
Right. So those 4 parent races each had capital cities. And when the ancients and the others assaulted Vera with the apocalypse, essentially, the goddess of creation helped form these divine gateways, these portals that left the planet for a certain portion of the population of these different races. And they went to a planet that's kind of void of the essence of magic, essentially, and that kept them safe for multiple millennia. And then after a period of time, and this is where the player character, comes into the storyline. After a period of time, those divine gateways opened up again, and nobody knows really why. But these civilizations, after a long period of time, kind of divided into different sub races. And as you return to Vera, you're returning through these divine gateways that exist within one of the 4 capital cities of these great old civilizations. So that's why there's 4 starting points. But because there's different subsets of these races now, they kind of divide out, and they get split into different starting kind of areas once you return to the planet through the divine gateway.
That's one of the helping reasons
Is there
why.
any faction barrier with them?
Say that again.
Is there like a faction barrier between them? Like, does the first humans and elves and orcs and dwarves hate the other side?
I see. So there's definitely story related tension that exists between the races, but there's no hard factions. And additionally, the races.
Just before Tulnar.
Well, there is a 9th race. The Tulnar is essentially the logical evolution of the many minor races that remained on Vera after the apocalypse, as well as the major races that all cohabitated within the Underrealm area and resulted in this very odd race that was born out of that commingling. And that's the Tulnar.
There's one thing that I was really curious about that other games haven't done is if I'm level 1 and I see a level 5, you were talking about the spawns being stronger in certain areas. If I'm able to skillfully kill that without it killing me, will I get the appropriate XP for killing it because it's level 5 and I'm level 1, or would it be level 1 or 2 XP?
So there's definitely one thing I hate about other games that they do, which is exactly what you just described, where they nerf your accomplishment.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool, and I always love doing it as a player, trying to bat outside of my league, and if I accomplish it, then I want to get the reward for it. So we're not going to be artificially suppressing the reward and experience that's gained.
I have one
in
question.
regards to that, first.
Oh, sorry. This is all PvP orientated. I'm just worrying about the crafting orientated. Is there going to be like a so you mentioned that there might be a weapon or a relic that there might be only one per server. Is there something similar to that for like tools for crafts? Like there's a blacksmith hammer that will give you a slightly better chance to craft that item, or
so there's the unique legendary drops that exist, which are at any given time there will only ever be one of these different types on the server. So there was in Lineage 2, one of the inspirations that I had for this, there was this sword called the Zarich sword. The Zarich sword was awesome. It was such a troll item, but it created a lot of interesting experiences. So it's not the difference there though is that it flagged you red and you could be killed by anybody, and then you dropped it and they got it, and it was kind of weird. The idea though of having that unique legendary drop occur is, I think, a really cool one, and it's not going to exist for the tools side of things. We want to house that in more of a progression that can be a little predictable as opposed to an RNG chance, where you have to craft up to the legendary equipment in order to harvest the legendary gatherables. But on the gear front, I think it's a really fun idea to essentially have those unique legendary drops.
Yeah, just like it to make it as more as like you go to the tier 5 node because there's a crafter there that crafts like a certain type of way that makes you look slightly better, but he's known for crafting that better than anyone else. You know what I mean? Like it's
right. Yeah, I mean, because if you're talking on the crafting side of the artisanship tree, which there's 3 branches: gathering, processing, and crafting. The gathering is where the tool making is really housed for harvestables. But on the crafting side, when you're completing gear, the idea there is that like becoming a master crafter or a master processor or a master gatherer should be a significant time investment and resource investment. And because of that, it should also be something that is, when you achieve that status, it's like people on the server know who you are. And that's like a status and title that is just unique to the achievement you've had. And one of the ways,
server-wide?
no, but it is represented on the gear that's created and the process material that gets created and on the gatherables.
Okay.
So people will know you by those things.
So it's like the armor that's tagged by the person who created it, like.
Correct. Yep.
So
you'll see their username. Exactly. You'll see their name on the description.
That's
I got
really
a
cool.
question here.
So one thing when I'm thinking about that is there's a little bit concerning maybe is like, so if there's legendary materials, right, and you have to refine those down to ingots or whatever, legendary ingots, and those into legendary weapons, let's say, right? Since ideally the final product is going to require multiple resources that are also rare, I feel like being able to become a legendary like crafter or blacksmith per se is a lot harder than a gatherer, because you need so much more investment if those items are going to cost a lot of money per se.
So I would say that that's an astute observation, and it's intended in the design that the difficulty of acquiring and completing certain things actually elevates from gatherer to processor to crafter. The crafter will be the most difficult branch of the artisanship tree in order to achieve the highest type of essentially performance. But that's intended, and the reason why is because it's sort of built on a how do you describe it? A foundational system where this I hate to use the word pyramid, but where this pyramid of supply chain exists from the gatherer to the processor to eventually then the crafter at the top, and it does become a little bit more difficult in that regard.
So in that regard, continuing on that, so then I feel like from like a money making aspect, because obviously you've mentioned that money is a heavy influence into the end game. Since a legendary weapon requires X amount of legendary materials that are still pretty hard to get, wouldn't the gatherer be able to charge really as much as they like and make it like, wouldn't they be the absolute like controller of the market? And I feel like that makes it
not necessarily, and the reason why is because if we're talking about the rare gatherables to the rare processed goods to the legendary equipment that's then spawned out of it, on the gathering side, in order to achieve that rare proc on the gatherer, on the harvestable, you need to have a high quality tool that you create. So there's a barrier there. And then on the processing side, when you receive that raw gatherable that is higher grade quality, you cannot process it with the same infrastructure that you would the lower grade material. So if I have, let's say, rare mithril ore, I cannot process that mithril ore in the same stage and level smelter on my freehold. It has to be an advanced stage of that building type. So each building that requires a blueprint to process goods also has advancements that must be made. So at each stage from gatherer to processor to crafter, you are required to have certain prerequisites before those elite types of materials can be essentially gathered, processed, or crafted. On the crafting side, in order to implement the rare gosh, I'm probably giving way too much information. I'm going to get killed if I keep
I know how to get out good questions. I've been here before. Sorry.
You're going to get me in trouble. Actually, stop that thought. I know we haven't released the blog yet on the crafting stuff, and there's a lot of stuff there that people don't know. And now there's going to probably be some video, and then Margaret's going to kill me. So let me stop.
Everybody hush, or else I'm calling you out.
Just to give you, was just taking down level 5.
It's all good if you need notes. I'm pretty sure Shays is in the chat.
Oh, I know. My gosh.
Shadow played. Why would
That
you do
was
this to
how,
us,
how did
Steven?
you easily walked me into that too. You like led
I
me
really
by my
did. I'm so
nose.
sorry.
Unbelievable. Can't even trust you.
Okay, well then we'll drop the subject, and I'll go to my previous question that I want to ask, which is regarding PvE kind of stuff. And somebody had mentioned, like, if you were a level 1 fighting a level 5, how easy is it to, let's say, be a level 1 character, and like, let's say you're an archer and just cheesing something with ranged targeting? Like, how draggable are mobs?
So there's certain
And you outrun
systems there are certain systems within the behavior tree of the NPCs that takes into account the ability of certain classes to kite. And this has been
Lovely.
seen. I mean, this has been seen in other games as well. But essentially, there's a tick on the NPC's AI blackboard, and as that tick is recurring, and it's the NPC is noticing, hey, I haven't succeeded to hit against it's dealing damage to me. It will have certain responses, such as pull tactics or CC effects, or essentially fast speed that it can catch up. And then additionally, if you obviously you move too far, it's going to leash as well. So those are those are thought out. We're designing the AI, especially within complementing the different classes that are ranged, not to make this a boring experience. It should be as difficult for a ranged player as.
I'm glad I heard that now, because I would have done.
They'll switch it up on you too.
So obviously
That
nobody
makes
really
sense.
wants a system where people can cheese it easily. But is it possible to skillfully like outmaneuver something without getting hit?
Is it possible to skillfully outmaneuver something without getting hit? Yeah, I think that some of the mechanics in both the mobility skills that are present, as well as the dodge mechanics, or some other things that might be employed during your normal skill rotation, it would make it possible. And I mean, it should be possible for you to evade certain key attacks. Yeah, I think that's part of the design.
Yeah, cool. That makes me feel a lot better.
Just say, can I go invisible and attack, and then go back invisible and attack?
I mean,
It's like a
invisibility is going to come off. It'll have a cooldown period, so you can't just repeatedly do it. But you will be able to go invisible, and then when you attack, it does take you out invisible. I can take one more question, but
okay, final question from me. This is a personal question. Sorry, this is one I have to make sure I get out. As a content creator, how can I reach out to inquire about content creation things?
Yeah, that's
regarding.
That's a good question.
Ashes.
So at the moment, because we're not yet in the Alpha 1 phase of testing, the content creation program is currently, it doesn't accept any additional content creators, but we will be revamping the content creation program before the launch of Alpha 1, and we will release that information for applying and getting accepted into the program around before that time.
Is there requirements on that, or is there?
Yes, there's going to be certain requirements. Of course, I reserve the right to do whatever the hell I want and invite anybody who might not live up to those requirements.
Don't forget my name.
That's how I become a content creator.
I
By the
noticed
way,
somebody in chat.
before you go, thank you for all you're doing, man. This stuff
thanks,
is
Steven.
insane,
That's
man.
awesome.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate
Like,
that.
we've been waiting for you for like years, and it feels like you're just like literally a fresh breath of air, man. We've been wanting all this stuff and these crazy advanced features that you're putting in. It's just blowing our mind.
Hey,
you get married.
I just want to let you guys know that it means a lot to me and the developers on the team to hear you guys say that, and to see you type it, and to see you post it. It is the biggest motivating factor for us when we get to see the positive reaction on our theories and design philosophies. So we're happy you guys are part of the community, and we look forward to a really fun time together. So
give Bacon a hug for us.
I will.
Cool.
I give Bacon a hug whenever I see him. Unfortunately, Corona has derailed that a little bit, but I try to.
Yeah,
we need a
One
Corona
side
stick
note.
in the game.
one side note on the content creation thing, is that something we should keep an eye out on Twitter for, or is there like a email
there's gonna
sign up
be
list we can
Twitter.
keep an eye on?
So once you're registered,
I'm following you right now.
once you're registered on the website, you're part of the newsletter. When we do roll out the new content creator program, it will be done through the newsletter, through Twitter, through everything, Discord, all that stuff.
Okay, cool. So we'll know about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
All right, I'm gonna go to bed, guys. Have a good night.
Have a good sleep. Take care.
Thanks again.
Enjoy the meetings.
Appreciate it.
Later.
Very
All
cool.
right, guys.
Everybody
Wow,
can go back to
man.
talking over each other.